Alright guys, so I've got something a bit different with this one. This is the first Kinetic watch I'm checking out on the channel, and it's from a brand that you might not have heard of before, but I've checked out a couple of their watches previously, and it's Yelang. So as well as having Kinetic, it's also got Tritium. So a really interesting combination, and one that I've not seen before, but let me know, have you? Their previous watch I checked out was Tritium and Solar, so if you missed that one, I'll leave a link to that up in the top, and also down in the description. But getting back to this one, this is the review of the Yelang V1035 Kinetic. So in the box you'll get the watch obviously, link removal tool, and also this pretty nice gift bag if you do want to gift it to someone. Most people probably won't use it, but it's a nice little added extra. But now let's get all this out of the way and get down to the actual watch itself. So there's a few different dial versions available with this one. If you want to see them all, check out the link in the description. But I've gone with the blue one, and it's kind of the blue in the centre and then fades out to black toward the edge. So they do a green one like that as well, and then the rest are more or less black with a couple of little accents maybe on some of them. And as well as that, they also have different colour tritium tubes depending on what colour dial you go for too. But before we get into all that, first of all let's go over the dimensions. So we've got a diameter of 44mm, but don't worry, it does actually wear slightly smaller than that I think. Then we've got a thickness of 13.1, lug width of 22, and then the all important lug to lug is coming in at 48.2. But we do actually have male end links on this, although they do drop down pretty quickly and more or less in line with the case. So although the effective lug to lug is actually larger than 48.2, it doesn't wear that much larger. Then when it comes to the weight on the supply bracelet with all the links included, it's coming in 201 grams, and then size for my 7-inch wrist, it's coming in about 181. So we'll take a closer look at that now, starting with the clasp. So we've got the Yelang branding on there, and take a look at the side, you've got 3 levels of micro adjust. So you've got a fold over, double pushers. It is just a pressed clasp, but that's cheap and easy enough to swap out. Now getting onto the case back, you can see we've got a display case back there, so you can see that little rotor because we've got that kinetic movement. So this is actually a hybrid movement, but I'll get into more detail on that when we get onto the movement itself. So to screw down case back, and then we've got the specs around the outside saying Kinetic watch, stainless steel, water resistance, 100 meters, and the fact that it's got tritium tubes too. Now I'll quickly show you the bracelet as well. So it's pretty nicely finished, fully brushed, no sharp edges or anything. And then we have actually got just push pins on that. But now let's get onto the head of the watch. So you can see we've got that signed crown there with the Yelang logo. We've also got 2 pushers, which I will talk about again when we get into the movement, because there is something interesting and also odd with them. So again, fully brushed finish, nicely done. And then we've got a little bit of polishing on that bezel. And you can also see we've got that flat crystal, which we'll be checking in a bit if it is sapphire or not. If we quickly flick around to the other side, you can see it's slightly different here. So it's mainly brushed, but we have actually got a polished section in the centre. A little bit strange, not entirely sure why they've done that. I imagine it's to try and break it up so it doesn't look as thick, but if you're going to do something, do it across the whole of the case, not just a little bit in the centre. But now let's get onto the dial, because this is where it gets interesting with those tritium tubes. So you can see they're actually inset into the chapter ring, which is quite nice. Gives a nice look to it, a nice effect. And then we've got that white either side of them. And then we've also got tritium on the hands as well, obviously. And we do have nice proportions on those hands. And then we've got that window at the 3 o'clock for the day and the date. Again, that is quite nice to have. One thing I'm not so keen on though, is the fact that we've got quite a lot going on this dial. Got that really big logo and also the Yelang branding underneath. Then we've got all that text at the bottom. I'd like to have seen that stripped back. Just have the Yelang logo, don't need the text underneath, make it a bit smaller maybe. And then with the text at the bottom, just have Kinetic and then T100. That'd be enough. I personally don't think it needs those minutes printed on the inside either. I'd get rid of them too, because again, they're just cluttering the dial a bit I think. But let me know, do you agree? Or do you think that'd leave a bit too much empty space? And you might have noticed by now as well, we've actually got a textured dial on this. It's fairly subtle when you're first looking at it, but if it catches the light just right, or when you're zoomed in obviously, it's more apparent. But now let's check out whether we've got Sapphire Crystal on this or not, using the trusty diamond selector tool, starting with the front. And yep, that is Sapphire Crystal. Now let's quickly flick it over and check out the back. And as you can see, that is just mineral. Not all that surprising. So now let's get on to one of the bits that you probably really want to know about, and that is the tritium. See if that is any good, and if you haven't seen it before, what it actually looks like. So with this blue dial version, you can see I've got the blue tritium. If you go for the green dial, you get green. So this is T100, so that lasts 25 years apparently. I've previously had a watch that had T25, which wasn't as bright. That was before I actually had the channel. And as I say, this T100 is definitely brighter than that. And again, up at the top you've got that orange, so indicating which way around it is, and then above that you can see we've got that loom pip. Doesn't specify on the listing what loom they're using, but it looks like it's probably C3. Obviously that will fade eventually, whereas the tritium will be glowing all night long, no problem whatsoever, and obviously it glows in the day even though you can't see it. I've been looking for a tritium watch for a while because I work nights, so having something like that is really useful for me. So let me know down in the comments whether you've got any tritium watches and what you think of them, or if you haven't and you do want to get one. So before I show you this movement in action, talk about that in a bit more detail, first of all let's go over the bezel. So it's 120 click steel bezel, no backplay, pretty nice action. And then when it comes to the alignment, I'll quickly show you that, zoom in so you can see in a bit more detail. And you'll see that mine is ever so slightly off, which is a little bit of a shame. It's not massively out, just a little touch. But now let's get on to what makes this watch really interesting aside from that tritium, and that is the movement. So it's an Epson PX83, and as I said, that's a kinetic movement. But if you're not sure what that means, I'll show you in action now. So if we're going to unscrew the crown, and then pop it out to the first position, we can change that day and date, one way to do the day, and then the opposite way to do the date. And then if we pop it out to the second position, you'll see that second hand will stop. So we've got hacking, and then we can just change the time obviously. And then once we've done that, if we pop it back in, the second hand will re-engage. And then screw it back down, all works nicely. Crown guards don't get in the way of screwing it down either. So I'll get a quick zoom in so you can see that a bit more clearly. And you see, pretty nice access despite having the crown guards. But now moving on to these pushers, this is where it gets interesting as I said. So this bottom one doesn't actually function. They don't really need that. I don't really know why they put it on there, because you only really need this top one. So you're probably wondering, what does it actually do? If I press it once, you'll see the second hand will actually sweep a bit. But what does that mean? Well, depending on how far it sweeps, that is your power indicator for the battery. So 5 seconds equals 1 day, 10 seconds equals 7 days, 20 seconds equals 1 month, and 30 seconds equates to the maximum 6 months. And you can also see there as well, when I did that, it did pause for a while. So I'll let it get around to 12 again, and then we can count exactly how much I've got power reserve wise on this now. So if I press it now, we've got 20 seconds. So as I told you earlier, that equates to 1 month of power. And as I said, the maximum will be 6 months. If you wear it more, obviously it's going to charge up more. But because I'm reviewing multiple watches, I'm alternating between, so I've not got it up to the 6 months yet. And obviously the way that works is using that rotor that we saw earlier on the back. So it charges kind of like an automatic watch, but it is quartz. So essentially it is a hybrid, which I do think is pretty interesting. And as I say, not something I've seen before or reviewed before. But now you probably want to know how it wears on wrist before you make up your mind whether you want to pick one up or not. So let's do that now and go over the pros and cons as well. And here it is on my 7-inch wrist. And as I said, I do think it wears smaller than you'd expect, given that 44mm diameter, and also those male end links, but as I said, they drop down pretty much in line with the case, so it doesn't really add too much to that lug to lug. Although it is still a fairly thick watch though, but given the overall dimensions, I think it kind of works. When it comes to the bracelet, I've managed to get the perfect fit, despite only having 3 levels of micro adjust. Although again, I would have liked to have seen a milled clasp on that. No sharp edges on the bracelet either. And despite what I said earlier about there being quite a lot going on the dial, it's still quite legible as well, I think. Those white markers either side of the tritium tubes I think help quite a bit, as well as those white hands contrasting nicely. But I would still like to see that text just reduced a bit. And again, as I said earlier, I just don't think you really need those minutes on the inside either, just get rid of them. And the same goes for that fake pusher down at the bottom. You don't need it, don't put it there. But that is pretty much it for the issues. Maybe I would have liked to have seen it slightly smaller, maybe 42mm at the most. That being said though, I've been doing a lot of smaller watches lately, and a lot of people have been commenting saying they want to see some bigger stuff, so maybe this is going to be for you. I think it works on my 7-inch wrist, but I wouldn't be going any smaller than that, because I think it'd be just too big on your wrist. But overall, I'm pretty happy with it. As I say, it's really nice having tritium, especially because I work nights, so that is useful for me. That might vary depending on where you're going to be wearing the watch and how you're going to be using it, but either way it is just cool anyway. Especially being the T100 and not T25, so it is a bit brighter. And the same goes for the kinetic movement. It's not something I've checked out before, something a bit different, and it's just interesting. And because you've got that rotor on the back, it kind of sometimes feels like it is actually automatic, so it is a really interesting hybrid. So, would I recommend this watch? As long as you've got a 7-inch wrist or bigger, yeah, I think I would. You've got that T100 Tritium, which is really good, not the T25, that interesting hybrid kinetic movement, sapphire crystal on the front, and a pretty nice overall look, I think. But if this one isn't for you, and you want something a bit smaller, which has still got tritium, I'll leave a link to the previous watch I've reviewed from them, as that one also has an interesting movement, but instead of being kinetic, it's actually solar. But that's it for this one, guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.